I'd like to introduce Lubin Pfeiffer, arguably one of our most talented recreational fishermen. He's had a lifetime of catching 100 plus centimetre Murray cod. He makes me feel inadequate. 90 centimetres, Gus, what have you been doing, right? And he's also represented Australia at World and Commonwealth Fly Fishing Champions 6 times. He's been in winning teams. He's had individual gold medals. There's more to him. He's written extensively for Australian magazines over a decade. He's worked on TV shows. He's co-hosted in New Zealand's Big Angry Fish Show. I used to love it, seeing him chase those snapper on the flies, pretty cool. He's currently the host of Full Scale Fishing Adventures, which sees him travelling across Australia full time. He's an amazing fishing. Lubin will be discussing the state of cod fishing across the state and the country, and how there's never been a better time to be a cod fisher. Please welcome Lubin Pfeiffer.
Thanks very much, Graham. Thank you. G'day everyone. My name, as Graham said, is Lubin Pfeiffer. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming along, and as a South Australian, I'm just truly honoured to be invited here to talk in front of you today. I'm very thankful. What I'm going to run through today is my fishing journey, which has led me to be a full-time fisher, a lot of the time chasing Murray cod for my YouTube videos. And it's really been an interesting time to look back over what has been 20 years of chasing big cod with lures for me. So firstly, I'd just like to give a bit of a plug to my YouTube show. So every Thursday at 5:30, a new episode goes up, heavily focused on Murray cod fishing. All the episodes are up there on the channel, so if you want to check out some of the content, I'd be hugely appreciative. There's heaps of Murray cod stuff, and it's been great to be able to do something different from writing articles for many years. YouTube's been really cool to do. So this is where it all started for me. This is 20 years ago on the Murray River. This was the first Murray cod that I caught on a lure. It took me 12 months to catch this fish of trying all the time. I spent ages on the river trolling around in hope that one day I would actually catch a fish. And I remember the friend that I used to fish with, he would always get the callop or the yellers, and I never ever caught anything. And then one day this fish grabbed the lure, and that really set the scene for the next 20 years of my life, really. I love the river, and I spend so much time chasing these wonderful fish. So in the early years, So in the early years, it was a very different river when we started fishing down home, which is I do a lot of fishing in Loch 1, and back in the early days, you couldn't actually lure fish on a reach which was being commercially fished. So you're allowed to bait fish off the bank. You couldn't bait fish in a boat, but there was all these areas that had never been lure fished before. The pros might have lure fished them a bit, but lure fishing, commercial fishing ceased in the early 2000s, and catch and release lure fishing for Murray cod became very popular. What was interesting is back in the early days, what I think were the early days for me, when I would go and buy lures, you could go to the hardware store and you could buy 3 lures. You could buy a stump jumper, you could buy an orgy plough, or a Halco poltergeist. And that was it. It wasn't really spinnerbaits. You could, people still used aeroplane spinners and stuff like that, but it's been such a big progression. Electric motors were in their infancy. In the early days, we didn't actually know that you could use electric motors in the river because we thought that they would go rusty. So all these things had changed, which made lure fishing more accessible for anglers like me. So this is the second ever Murray cod that I caught. We're actually bait fishing on a piece of timber, and my friend and I decided we might have a bit of a troll along the other side. So we untied the boat, put the lures out the back, and about halfway across the river, I hooked this fish. Now, looking back on it now, the probability of that actually happening these days, it's so lucky. I just think the fish gods were shining down on me that day to allow that to happen, to inspire me more to keep fishing for these fish. And what happened over the next 10 years was just amazing. I was very lucky to be fishing in the areas where I was during those times, and I had really supportive parents, which allowed me to fish a lot. And I really like this photo. It's a sign of the times. I've got my Abu Garcia 6500, my ugly stick rod spooled with spider wire, because spider wire was about the only braid that you could buy back in those days. I've got my 3/4 Stussy shorts on, and we just went fishing all the time. So this is one out of my first tinnies. You can see I've still got the big paddles in there. We actually, before we knew that we could use electric motors in the river, my friend and I would actually take turns rowing. So we'd row with the big wooden oars up and down the bank. And once you were sort of tired, you'd swap over and then they could fish so you could have a row for a while. And then we actually got an electric motor, which is really exciting. And that led to 10 years of really amazing fishing. I never actually had a petrol motor on my boat for a lot of years, and I never had a four-wheel drive, so my fishing day would entail of unloading the boat on the top of the ramp. I'd have to drag it down the ramp, put everything in it, hook up the electric, and the day's fishing day would be as long as your electric motor battery lasted, and then sometimes you'd have to row back to the ramp. And most of the time on the river in those days, you would see old blokes fishing, but they'd quite often have either a bucket or a car tyre or something which would slow them down enough to be able to troll at the right speed. This fish is a really memorable fish of a session a friend of mine and I had. It was an 8-fish day. We had trolling a 300-metre stretch of river. So we just went up and down with our stump jumpers out the back and managed to catch 8 giant Murray cod, which just is forever etched in my memory. And interestingly, back in those days, there was no social media, so I didn't get a phone until I was in my early 20s. And if you took a photo of a fish back in those days, you'd have to fish until you finished the roll of film, and then you take it into the local pharmacy, and then you'd wait 2 days, go in and pick up your photos, and hopefully some of those photos turned out well. This fish is quite a memorable fish. I remember back in the early days when I was fishing the river, there wasn't many people around. You never really used to see, there was sure in the town areas you'd see the old blokes trolling the cliff there, but there was never really many people on the river, and I just remember coming around, trolling all the little banks and stuff, and I came around this one bend, and there was this giant laydown along this bank, and the very first pass I ever went over that log, this fish grabbed the lure, coughed up a big callop when I landed him. I didn't actually bring him in the boat or anything, he was too big to lift, so I just unhooked him, took a photo with my disposable pharmacy camera and sent him on his way. So years of trolling on the river. I trolled aimlessly around all the time, but we got into casting lures, and this was the first fish that I'd caught casting a lure in the Murray River on a stump jumper. Once again, took a very long time to achieve that fish, but you just kept at it, you kept casting and knew eventually something would happen. And we had many great years of casting lures. It wasn't uncommon to get 5 big fish blind casting for a morning on the river. We were very fortunate with the fishing that we had growing up. Now, this is a photo of a fish that coughed up a shag. It was quite amazing. In its infancy with my fishing, I didn't really understand that cod would actually eat things that big, but I had them cough up fish like carps and yellows, and then I actually had 2 big fish cough up shags as well. It was very interesting times. So that was my early upbringing, my first 10 years of cod fishing. And then there were some really big changes. So in 2009, SA introduced a moratorium for fishing for all Murray cod. So they actually closed the fishery down. So it encompassed the whole state. So there was other areas that we had Murray cod, but in the whole of South Australia, you weren't allowed to cod fish for 2 years, which is a really sad time. And then when they reopened it, they introduced a do not remove any part of the fish from the water and a 5-month close season. So we went from 3 months to 5 months. But I was just happy to be able to be fishing again, but it was a total ban on all cod. Originally, South Australia actually had the first slot limit, so we had 60 centimetres to a metre. You could keep fish within that slot limit, but anything over a metre had to go back. But over that time, Victoria and New South Wales actually adopted, as Taylor said before, a similar slot limit, which is just fantastic. I remember when I first started too, it was still common to see set lines all along the rivers, and they were banned about those times too. So it was these huge changes that were happening which were making the fishery better and better. In 2011, there was a really big flood and the first of the big blackwater events, which is a really sad time for the Murray. But the fishing after the flood was actually really good, which was really encouraging. So after the 2014 floods, there was so much uncertainty about what the fishing would be like, but it actually worked out to be a great few years of fishing again on the Murray. This is a really nice fish from Loch 9. I'm very fortunate. I like to travel the lower Murray, so I fish pretty much from Yarrawonga down to the bottom of Loch 1. This is Milan Radinick from Big Angry Fish. Now, Milan had quite a journey catching his first big Murray cod. It took him 2 weeks over 3 trips to Australia to achieve the fish that he came to catch. But he was dedicated. And it's so different now. I like using active target and live scope, but back in those days, you had to cast and you had to troll and you just could not give up. And Milan did that every day. We'd get up early, we'd fish until dark, and he did that every day for 2 weeks until finally he got the fish that he wanted to catch. It was a really amazing fish. And then we spent a lot of time fishing together, caught some really great fish. But I think this fish from Loch 7 is a really memorable fish for me. I'm not quite sure. I think we did a fast water trip, which sort of got Milan into the surface luring for cod. But Milan decided that he never wanted to catch a subsurface cod ever again after he saw the first surface bite. So when we would go fishing, I would put the electric motor pedal up the back of the boat and I would let Milan have the front of the boat. Everyone that's watched Big Angry Fish would know that he likes to use a big long rod and wear funny clothes and stuff. So he would be up the front of the boat with his big long rod and his surface lure, and he would just cast and retrieve that all day. And this was a really foggy morning, one morning, and he cast across this root base on this little sandbar, and this fish, it was like a car had exploded in the water. The water erupting and the noise that this fish made will just be forever etched in my mind. And it was just so cool to see him with that fish in the water. Just such an amazing fish to catch on the surface. And during those years between 2014 and the next flood in 2016, had some really great fishing. These are just some of the fish that was lucky enough to be able to catch. So this is a trip that I did with Lee Rayner, and interestingly, Milan, it took us 2 weeks to catch the fish, but the first afternoon with Lee, we got 3 big ones on the first afternoon of fishing. They arrived at 4 o'clock to do some filming, and they said, "Did you want to go out for a fish?" And I said, "Absolutely, we should always just be casting. If we're going to do anything, we should be casting." And we caught 3 fish that afternoon, which is just, I think that explains Murray cod. They're just so unpredictable like that, and I think that's what makes me love them so much. I don't think you'll ever quite grasp exactly what makes them tick. So in 2016, we had another big flood, and the water changed. The lower ends of the river were really hard to fish, and this sort of rekindled a surface obsession that I had for many years. This is an early photo of me. I used to fish the Broughton River in the mid-north of South Australia relentlessly. The time to fish it was on the full moon. So every full moon, I would be up there in the dark, walking around in the bush, casting surface lures. But knowing that you could potentially catch these giant fish out of the Murray on these surface lures really got this surface obsession started. And I think rather than trying to talk about the surface stuff, I'll just play this video and that explains it really well. If the video is going to play, here we go. Got him! Got him! He is huge! That is absolutely massive. That's a good fish. Got him! Holy cow! Oh my god! Oh. Oh. Oh my god! Oh, oh he came off. Oh my god, that is absolutely giant. Oh my god. But then we've caught that thing. What an absolute behemoth. Now, I've spent a little bit of time with this fish already stuffing around through the tree, so I'm going to get it back. What? So that's why I like surface fishing. I do lots of different types of fishing, but pretty much if the opportunity presents, I will spend every prime time, morning and afternoon, throwing around a big surface lure in hope that something like that happens. Now, so the big changes of today, there's been so many changes, and the biggest one I think for cod anglers has been the invention of forward-facing sonar, so live scope and active target. And I would relate this to the introduction of electric motors. It's just made things a lot easier for cod anglers. I will say that if I had to choose between having an electric motor and having forward-facing sonar, I would choose a electric motor. But it's such an interesting discussion that we've had throughout the cod community of what effects the forward-facing sonar has, and I think my opinion of it is that we can treat the fish really well. It doesn't matter whether you catch them on bait, whether you catch them trolling or you catch them using forward-facing sonar. We've got slot limits. If we treat the fish well, we put the fish back. It's just another piece of kit within our angling arsenal to be able to catch the fish that we all love. So we had massive floods in the Murray-Darling Basin in 2023, which is the biggest flood a lot of us have ever seen in our lives. And we had another Blackwater event, which is a really devastating thing to happen to the river. But the really great thing that I've seen come out of this 2023 flood is in the lower Murray River, there's been an explosion of little cods. And I was really, really proud to say a few months ago that I caught my smallest Murray cod on the river at home, and that's just so exciting. And it's been really common to hear people say that they're catching lots of small cod through the lower Murray-Darling Basin, and that's really exciting for the future of the fishery. So as each year has passed, and I think the best days have been, every year something amazing happens. This year, it has been catching surface beasts like this. This is my biggest subsurface fish for the year. And then had some really amazing fly fishing on the Ovens as well. And I absolutely love travelling over and fishing the Ovens River. It's a magic river, and it's great to see potentially, how the rivers can be when they get brought back to, numbers of fish which you would expect in rivers like that. So I think lastly, I'd like to run through, because there's definitely something, there's lots of things that we can improve on, but personally, I think the biggest thing we can do is love the cods and treat them with respect. So when you go out fishing, be ready, have everything there ready to go, your pliers, your cutters, all that sort of stuff. If you start fishing, particularly I think for anglers that are using forward-facing sonar and have an increased chance of catching a big fish, the first thing that you should be thinking about is actually what are you going to do when you catch that big fish, because chances are increasing for everyone every day. So be ready. Reduce the handling time. I really think reducing the air time is a great thing, but reducing the handling time overall is really important as well. One big thing that I've done in the last 2 years, I did it a number of years ago, but then I sort of went back to using barbs again. But for all of my subsurface lures, I crush the barbs on my lures. And yes, I might have the odd fish roll out and fall off, but I can tell you, if you get a fish that's hooked in a bad place or a fish that's like really tangled in the hooks, barbless is just so fantastic. The hooks just come out, and yeah, it's not that I feel bad for the fish, but I just feel so much better that you can, send them on their way without damaging their face too much after you've enjoyed the capture. Never put them on a dry surface. And I think too, another thing with forward-facing sonar, years ago, if you're lucky enough to run across a fish trolling during summer, because the fish go deep, that was one thing. But these days, we can see the fish, we know where they're cruising around, and I think we just have to be respectful that when it's really, really hot, there's probably a chance to go and chase a different sort of fish. And we're so lucky to have them. It's absolutely my favourite fish. And like I said, I'm so honoured to be able to come and talk my favourite fish in front of everyone today, and I'd just like to thank you all very much.